Hello everybody and welcome to our show, Self-Advocacy in Action. I'm your host, Gwen Squire, and today's special guest is Janine Jackson.
Hi, Gwen. It's
How are
really
ya?
nice to be here. I'm doing well.
Good. Let's talk about the program that you're involved with.
It's the First Responder Disability Awareness Training Project. We kind of affectionately call it FERDAT.
Okay.
Because that's easier to say.
Yes, it is.
And when I first started with this project, I didn't know what a first responder was.
Okay.
I didn't understand that this was law enforcement, firefighters, EMS, 911 operators, because essentially they're the first people who respond in case of an accident or some other catastrophic situation. So what would you like to know first about it?
Who runs it?
My boss is Dave Whalen. This was his brainchild.
Okay.
He was aware of how difficult it is for people with disabilities when they're in emergency situations, because first responders really don't know how to interact and how to respond even physically with people with disabilities.
Right.
In other words, like if a fireman had to carry someone out of a building,
Right.
And that person has, say, osteogenesis imperfecta. Bones break super easily.
Right.
If you pick somebody up the wrong way, you're breaking a lot of bones.
Right.
There have also been some very unfortunate incidents where officers, policemen, have either injured or killed people with disabilities because they didn't know how to handle the situation.
Yeah, I know that you have some examples of that.
I do, and I took some notes because I wanted to make sure that I had things, well said.
Right.
The first thing that I wanted to share is that in January of this year,
Okay.
a young man with autism was meeting with a tutor in a public library. And that was a very difficult situation for him because of all the people coming and going.
The noise.
Noise. And he tended to get very edgy, very nervous. About midway through the tutoring session, things became overwhelming for him, and he ran out of the library in an attempt to get to his dad's car. Unfortunately, while he was running, he ran into a patron in the library, and then outdoors he ran into a woman who had Parkinson's, and she fell, got a concussion. The young man was arrested and charged with felony assault because of this.
Okay.
And the woman's family is instigating a lawsuit. Now,
Wow.
it's not, the young man didn't do this intentionally.
Right.
But this is part of what the public needs to understand. And above and beyond first responders, pretty much everybody really needs to have some kind of education about disabilities.
Yes, they do.
Because people just don't understand.
Right.
And they've not had some of the opportunities. So it's really important to be able to do this.
Right.
One of the things I wanted to share before going into more of the incidents is that our basic training, we have 15 sections.
Okay.
The full training is 2 8-hour days.
Wow. Okay.
It's very in-depth. It's the only program of its kind in the entire United States.
Okay.
There are other programs that focus on a single disability.
Okay.
Sometimes they focus on one or two, but ours is really in-depth.
Okay.
And it covers virtually every major disability that there is.
Oh, good. See, I was going to ask all these questions. So. Yeah.
And often, the first responders, we get well, why do we need that?
Really?
Yeah, they don't know enough to know
Yeah.
what they don't know.
No.
And once they've had the training, all of the responses we have gotten have been, wow, we had no clue, or we really need more, or it was so much information. And one of the other things that you can do with this project is on our website, but we have all kinds of information. We even have basic signs for, especially for EMS. And someone can always call our office if they need some more information, or if they need something, you know, they've not sure that they'd handle the situation well, they can call and kind of check in. All right, going back to some of these incidents, also in 2016, in the beginning of February, there was a transgendered man in Mesa, Arizona. He had autism, learning disabilities, PTSD, some mental health issues, and ADHD. He was tased and beaten because the police didn't know how to handle. He was emotionally fragile. He called for help, and the police just trashed him. In 2015, there were 7 incidents that we have found so far, because we look online for news. We want to get actual news coverage, not something from a newsletter necessarily, or, you know, just somebody on the street. There were 7 incidents where officers either hurt or killed individuals with disabilities. And some of those included where, let's see, I'm sorry.
That's okay.
Move a little bit faster here. Well, how about we start with a 2014. And there was a situation where a police officer shot and killed a man who was having a seizure. There are certain kinds of seizures where you actually continue to move, you can talk. It's maybe not the same way you would if you were not having a seizure. But a police officer thought that he was acting strangely, and they'd had a call reporting someone acting suspiciously, and the officer shot and killed him.
He didn't have a weapon or anything?
Yeah.
Just because he had a seizure?
Because he was acting erratically.
Okay.
But if the police officer knew that there were people who acted a little bit differently while they were having a seizure, if he knew that somebody could still walk or talk. You know, most people only think of seizures as being the grand mal seizure, where you end up losing consciousness and you have muscle spasms and things like that. They have no idea that it can even be as minor, or at least the signs are as minor as maybe just
staring,
doing something like that. In 2014, there were 19 incidents where officers either killed or injured people with disabilities, and there was one school resource officer who handcuffed a 6-year-old because the young man, or the boy, was banging his head on a table and then against the wall. In the news article, it didn't say if the boy had autism, but it's a pretty good guess, because that's sort of one of the types of things that happen with an overload. Also in 2014, there was a woman named Yanira Serrano Garcia. She had a history of depression. And her family called for EMS to come and take her to a hospital for evaluation. The police showed up instead. And within 20 seconds of the police arriving at the scene, they shot and killed her. According to the officer, he was afraid she was going to attack him. According to other people on the scene at the time, she was holding a butter knife. and the officer insisted that he was in danger, and he shot her.
Wow.
If he had had some more education, perhaps he would have held back a little bit and waited to see what would happen,
Right.
not just go off
Okay.
the cuff. And it's not just first responders. There
Right.
are other people who need this education as well.
Yes.
One of the examples that was unfortunate was that also in 2015, there was a part-time employee at People Inc. who allegedly molested one of the
Yes.
clients.
I've heard of that. Yeah.
And, you know, that kind of thing just
Yeah.
shouldn't be happening.
I even know of doctors, when I was looking for a doctor myself, that didn't want to deal with me because of my disability, because they didn't know what about it. So they were apprehensive about it.
Yeah, one of the trainings that we're in the process of developing right now, actually we're getting pretty close to being done, is for healthcare professionals
Good. They need it.
to train how to handle somebody physically,
Right.
because that's really important when you
It
go
is.
see a doctor.
Yes.
Part of that training also alerts the medical professionals about what they are and are not allowed to do. Like, for
Yes.
instance, legally, a doctor is not allowed to refuse to treat you.
Really?
Yes, it's part of the ADA.
Wow, I didn't know that.
Yeah, so they're breaking the law if they
Okay.
refuse to treat you
Yeah.
because of your disability. There were another incident that happened in a nursing home
Okay.
where they found a patient with maggots in a chest wound.
Ew.
Yeah. The negligence, the neglect
Yes.
is often as bad and happens as frequently as some of these other situations. So there's another whole class of people who really needs to know more, learn
Yes.
more, so that they don't treat us like that.
So, what do you teach during these trainings?
Well, we go over one of the things that we our training manual, and it's really neat because every person who comes to a training gets not only the presentation, but they get to take home a manual that has all of the PowerPoints, the talking points, all of the information that the instructor, the trainer, has presented, so that if there's a question, they can go back and look it up.
Right.
There are also contact information for certain people that were in videos that we have,
Oh, okay.
because videos almost train better than
do.
talking.
Yes.
And so to have people who have disabilities, be part of this training, it really makes a big difference.
Yeah.
So our categories, we have an introduction and overview, explaining partly why do you need this.
Right.
Well, you need this because you're damaging people.
Right.
You need this because you don't have a clue how to treat someone.
Right.
Then there's encounters and trends. So where a first responder or somebody in healthcare or somebody in corrections, because that's another project that we're developing, if they've never met somebody with a disability, and that's still possible,
It is.
thank goodness not.
Right.
We're out and about a lot more than we used to be,
Oh,
so
yeah.
that's a
Oh,
good
yeah.
thing. Then there's response and outreach.
Okay.
And the first three categories are much more general. And then we get into discussing specific disabilities.
I was going to ask.
There's mental health issues,
Okay.
ADHD and learning disabilities, Tourette syndrome, visual impairments, hard of hearing, deaf,
Right.
physical disabilities,
Okay.
intellectual disabilities, autism.
Okay.
Especially because autism is so much on the rise,
Right.
or at least the diagnosis
Right.
is more often. Epilepsy, traumatic brain injury, dementia.
Okay.
Again, we have an aging country,
Yes, we do.
and the longer you live, the greater the chance that you will develop a dementia of some kind.
Right.
And it's not just Alzheimer's. There are other types of dementia with Parkinson's, with I'm drawing a blank. I'm sorry,
That's
but
okay.
there are.
are,
For instance,
yes.
another thing. I don't have dementia, but because of post-polio syndrome,
Right.
I have huge gaps in my memory,
Okay.
and sometimes I have difficulty finding a word
Yes.
that I want, and it's just gone.
Right.
And you look a little strange when you're talking, and all of a sudden
Yeah.
you don't know. You just, I'll think of something.
Yeah.
And then one of the more important parts, we have a section on person first language.
Okay.
Rather than saying that cripple
Right.
or that retard
Right.
or that wheelchair person.
Yes.
And of course, the idea behind person first language is to focus on the person first.
Exactly.
You're not that lady in the wheelchair. I'm not that lady in the wheelchair.
No.
You're Gwen Squires,
Right.
and you have a master's degree.
Yes.
I'm Janine Jackson, and I have a PhD.
Yes.
The wheelchair is a part of our lives,
Right, but it's not
but
us.
not all of our lives.
Exactly.
And
I do that on the bus a lot. I tell the drivers, because they'll say, I've got 2 wheelchairs on the bus, and I'll say, no, you have 2 people in the wheelchair on the bus.
yeah.
So,
And most of the time I can laugh at that,
right.
but there are other times when,
It's so aggravating.
yeah.
It is.
And to be treated like that by officers who are supposed to be protecting and respecting us, when it's somebody who's working in ambulance and says, no, your guide dog can't come with you, that's dirty,
Yes.
or there's no room.
Right.
Well, legally, that guide dog goes with you wherever you go,
Right.
as long as you are able to, to command.
Right.
If you're unconscious, that's kind of a gray area.
Right.
And there are only 2 places that a guide dog can't go. Do you know where they are?
No.
I didn't know until I started here.
Okay.
It's sterile environments, like a lab where things have to be kept, like a clean room
Or an operating room?
or an operating room.
Okay.
So if you're in the hospital, your dog can go with you to the hospital,
Okay.
but not into the operating room because that needs to be kept as sterile as possible.
Okay.
And the other place is food prep.
Oh,
So if your dog was at the hospital with you, couldn't go in the kitchen.
gotcha.
You can go into Subway or any other restaurant,
Right.
but the dog can't go into the kitchen.
Okay.
So the only 2 places. Everywhere else, by law, you're allowed to take your dog.
I didn't even know you could take the dog in the ambulance.
Yep. That's covered by the ADA, and
Okay.
it's law. Now, if you're unconscious,
Yeah.
then the officer at the scene is supposed to do what he can to get your guide animal to the hospital or to a safe place.
Right.
And the SPCA or a kennel is not a safe place
No.
for a guide dog.
No.
The guide dogs are too gentle. They won't fight back,
Right.
and they're very expensive animals. So even if you're out going from place to place with your guide dog, and someone else's dog attacks your dog,
Yes.
the owner of the attacking dog is responsible for any injury, or if your dog becomes too traumatized to continue working,
Okay.
then that responsibility is the owner of the dog who attacked you.
Wow.
Yeah.
And these are some of the things you talk about.
And
Sure.
yep. And as I said, we're developing, we're almost done with our training for healthcare.
Okay.
And, this isn't, I guess one of the things I also want to share is we really take time to make sure that we get our facts right,
Yes.
that we're not overloading too far.
Okay.
We custom adjust so that there's some things that officers might not need to know.
Right.
Like if you have, that a lot of people have comorbid conditions. For instance, with my post-polio syndrome, I have weak muscles, but I also have, sometimes my throat muscles are a little weak. So I have to be careful now when I'm drinking or eating.
Okay.
Or I take medication. I
Right.
take something for pain. I take, 2 or 3 different kinds of medication. I take an aspirin now,
Right.
So a policeman isn't going to know some of this stuff,
Right.
and yet it might be important to tell EMS when they come.
Yes.
And when someone is conscious, it's always best to talk to that person. One of the big points that, again, that we
Drive
drive home, try to encourage, try to reinforce is, don't go and talk to a bystander
Yes.
and say, what happened to her?
Right.
Don't even ask family members.
Right. Ask that person.
Ask that person. If you're having difficulty understanding and you have permission from the person who is the victim or the patient, then you could ask a family member to step in, or maybe a home care aide.
Yes.
Or if somebody happens to live in a group home, asking a staff person.
Right.
But don't talk over, don't talk around,
Right.
don't ignore the person who is your patient,
Yes.
who is the crime victim.
Yes.
Don't do that.
Right.
It's rude, and you might not get the information that you need.
Exactly. Yeah. That's what my doctor's great about. She talks directly to me. She didn't talk to my parents when they were alive. She's like, well, one knows herself best. I'm going to talk to one.
That is very impressive,
Yes.
because it is also very rare.
I know.
I also wanted to share that my boss, who wears many hats,
Yes. I know.
he has training, again, an acronym, DEAM, and it's to train employees of municipalities, towns, city, counties, what their rights and responsibilities are with the ADA.
Okay.
And so he can talk to the mayor. He can talk to other people in political situations and explain to them what their responsibilities are with regard to people with disabilities.
Okay.
And it's also really important for them to know, because if you're not in compliance with the law,
You're in trouble.
Yeah, well, and you can get hit with some enormous fines.
Yes.
Just huge fines.
Yes.
There was a town, I don't remember which one it was, but it's right here in Western New York, right close by, that got slapped with thousands of dollars worth of fines because they were not in compliance.
Oh.
And some of it they knew and didn't do, and some of it they didn't know.
Okay.
But the important thing is, this is a way to find out.
Right.
Be trained, know those little bits and pieces, so that so that maybe your township doesn't get bankrupted,
Right.
for that matter.
Yeah.
There's and he can also talk to businesses. He frequently presents at schools.
Right.
He's a powerhouse.
I know. I've worked with him in the past.
So, and there are lots of different kinds of training that can be done, and you could still call our office because, well, it's officially the FERDAT office. You could still reach Dave that way, and that could happen.
Okay. We've got just a little bit of time left, and I was going to give you about 2 minutes so that you could say what you wanted to say to the viewers.
Well, one of the things that's most important, I think, or if you can figure out a most important,
Yeah.
if anybody who sees this program knows of an incident, whether it's a good one or a really bad one, an unfortunate one where someone's been hurt or killed or whatever, they can call our office at 286-7355, or they can go to our website, FRDAT.com, FRDAT.com, and they can fill out something online.
Okay.
So we'd really like to know about those things so we can continue to educate the community.
Okay. Well, thank you for being here today.
Thank you for having me.
It's been a great talk. Learned a lot. I'd like to thank you all for joining us today, and I hope you join us again next time. This is Gwen Squire for Self-Advocacy in Action.
Walk.